this is what they're going to do to the American public if you aren't careful. And the American public was like, look at the squirrel.
Free Talk Live.
Titled Senate Passes Bill That Rebukes Trump and Opposes Israeli Boycott. So why don't you bring us up to date on what we've only gone into this thing, a couple paragraphs. Basically, the Senate overwhelmingly approving
77 to 23.
Yeah, that's pretty much overwhelming. A Middle East policy on Tuesday that included a rebuke to President Trump over his withdrawal of troops from Syria and Afghanistan, and a contested measure to allow state and municipal governments to punish companies that boycott, divest from, or place sanctions on Israel. That's kind of brings us back to speed. Where are we at now?
So they have a quote from Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader. This represents the broad consensus of this body about our nation's responsibilities as an ally and a partner, Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader, said on Tuesday. But for late inclusions of the anti-boycott, divest, and sanction, or anti-BDS provision, and an amendment by Mr. McConnell reproaching the president for a, quote, precipitous withdrawal of troops from Syria and Afghanistan raised some concerns in both parties. The measure opposing the Israel boycott, drafted by Senators Marco Rubio, Republican of Florida, and Joe Manchin III, Democrat of West Virginia, appeared to be calculated in part to drive a wedge between Israel supporters in the upper echelon of the Democrat Party and a younger activist wing more willing to challenge the unconditional American support of a Jewish state. Senate Democrats mulling presidential runs recoiled at the McConnell amendment, making a rare alliance with Mr. Trump as they declared it was time for American troops to come home from Afghanistan, the longest war in the nation's history.
Oh, my God. So the AP thought it was a headline that Trump said 19 years instead of 18 years that we've been in Afghanistan.
Oh,
Whoa,
that was
stop the presses.
That was the big problem with the statement. Oh, my God.
Yeah, they were like, we fact-checked the State of the Union address, and it was the headline, like Trump misstates. Trump
long?
exaggerates 1 year. Trump exaggerates length of U.S. Afghan involvement. It's like, bro, 19 years, it's been 18 years, okay?
It's well within the margin of error.
I'm sorry.
It is. The long and the short of it is we've been over there fighting a war on terror, I guess.
We've been there so long that I have children. I have 7 of my 8 children have never known a world where we were not bombing Afghanistan.
Can you imagine that? And I don't know how many people ever really think of it in those terms, that there is a whole generation coming out.
I have a 17-year-old. She's a senior in high school, and she has never known a world where we were not bombing Afghanistan.
Right. And more to the point is, do you want a world where your children are raised, God help us, maybe from cradle to grave, with your country never having a period of peace? And you get that coming from a veteran. I mean, I was in the military. Wars are not good things. We should not seek these things out. And we found one in 2001 that it just keeps on giving and giving and giving. And remember what Eisenhower said. Beware the military-industrial complex.
He got snowed by them while he was in office. That's why.
Yeah,
is he was warning the people on his way out, like, look, these people duped me.
Yeah,
and this is what they're going to do to the American public if you aren't careful. And the American public was like, look at the squirrel.
Well, a lot of people. It was the 50s. Things were rather idyllic. We had Ike.
Well, they had the United Nations, right? War is illegal.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything was gonna be a better world. And you've got a bunch of people. You've got a bunch of people in power with a lot of money sitting there going, yeah, but that just doesn't really sound very profitable. And we might need to tweak U.S. foreign policy just a little bit.
That's another reason I'm convinced that part of the American government is so supportive of Israel, is because it creates a permanent welfare warfare state. You create, so like when you saw everyone that's seen Economic Hitman, where they go in and they create problems and then they give them aid, and then the aid creates a permanent welfare state because the aid creates debt, which creates, oh, well, we're just going to take your resources, and now you're a permanent. Now our taxpayers in our country will send you aid every year, and you're just a permanent welfare state. Israel is a permanent welfare state as well, even though they've got like the 6th largest economy in the world, and they're like the 3rd largest weapons manufacturers in the world. We still send them billions of dollars a year in what they call surplus weapons.
Right.
And we send them billions of dollars a year that connected to the money is we have to spend at least this much of this money on weapons from companies in the U.S.
Right.
So it's corporate welfare. And as long as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict exists,
right,
it is a permanent source of corporate welfare. It doesn't matter if America is at peace. We will always have this permanent little spot where Lockheed and Boeing can make a few dollars and not go out of business.
Right, but you got to look at the Pentagon budget. You got to look at, but you can't look at the Pentagon budget. You cannot see where the money goes because this is all hidden. This is things that we can't talk about. For the first time, they allowed us to audit the Pentagon. That went well. $21 trillion they couldn't find. They couldn't figure out where it went. $21 trillion.
Well, I mean, they pay $21,000 for a friggin' toilet seat.
I know.
I mean,
I'll share one story. I was in the military. I worked in communications, and we had one very expensive piece of equipment. It was rack-based, rack-mounted, and I can't tell you what it did, but it was pretty freaking cool for this time. This is the early 80s. And if we needed to order another one of those, it was almost $2 million for this one rack of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So we had some planned expansions, and we were going to put in another cabinet. We weren't going to populate it yet. It was just going to be an empty rack. And we checked into the price to see how much that would be. It would be almost $2 million. So whether the cabinet came full of very expensive equipment or it came empty rack, meaning made out of nothing but sheets of metal, it was the same price, and the U.S. government was happy to pay for it. $855, $450 free.
It's not their money.
Give us a call. Let us know what you think. Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.